Hello and welcome to Gifted Underachievers, the podcast for mid-level creatives with delusional ambitions. In this segment, James and I attempt to set some goals for 2025, which goes about as well as you'd expect. Hope you enjoy.
How do you want to start? Yeah. Go, Lance.
Wild manifestation.
All right, I'm going. This is it. We
Coming in hot.
have started. So this is Pat and James. We're doing a segment. It's our first one of 2025. We've had a little bit of a break, so if we're a little rusty, sorry. But we've been having lots of giggles, and we're wiggly with excitement too.
I would say, we're more giddy than rusty.
Giddy and wiggly and rusty.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah. We're, because there's so many exciting, fun things that we want to do in 2025 in everything that we do, but especially with Gifted Underachievers.
Yeah. I mean, yes, when we're talking to each other, GU takes the stage, obviously, because it's a collaborative project we're doing together. When I'm by myself, I think about GU as just this really fun experiment for some reason. And also, I think of it with curiosity because I believe there's a lot of value in a collaboration in that you can sort of, you're not even really taking turns providing momentum or energy. It's just that it's easier when there's sort of an accountability partner or whatever. It's easier to do your shit. But when I'm by myself and I think about the other big things I want to achieve this year, like in 2025, really, I have to talk myself down. Wait a minute. Is that true? Do I have to talk myself down? No, I have to sort of rein in my ambitions, my delusions, and remember that it is a step-by-step. So I can't finish my Frankenstein novel until I do an exploratory draft, because that's just how I work. I have to figure out what it's about by writing a draft of what it might be about. And yeah, I have definite thoughts and I kind of know where I want to take it and I know who most of the characters are and most of the locations, but I know that every time I write a scene, there could be something in there that just requires me to move in that direction, and I'm okay with that. So, but it kind of, so it's a little daunting, and I have to think of it in smaller terms than I'm writing my novel in 2025. It's not my first one. I know how long they can take, and that depends. Like the first 4 or 5 I wrote, I did it. It took me 4 years for each one. But that's because I worked full time in a really high, like a heavy hours industry. Although I know it took me 4 years, I was probably a pretty fast writer because I just worked in the mornings before work when I could. And then between gigs, because I worked freelance, I would get 2 or 3 weeks and I try and grind out a big edit in those weeks or write a whole bunch of new scenes if I was still developing it. So now I'm like, okay, I've gotten a lot more jaded about the publishing industry. I'm more realistic, let me say. I never even thought about the publishing industry when I was trying to learn how to write a novel. So now I know a lot because I work with writers and I've been published. I think the trick for me with stuff like that I don't have a collaborator on to kind of keep me going is to break it down into smaller goals.
Yeah. Well, and we've found that with the podcast is, we talk about, here's marketing ideas. We talk about we want to monetize, but we don't want to sell.
Yeah.
Right. We don't want to turn segments into sales opportunities and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And we want to explore, what do we do with Spotify? What do we do with, iTunes? What do we do with all these different things? And we've noticed that over the course of the last year, some things are really easy to do and get done. And some things we talk about and they either kind of partially get done or they don't get done at all.
Mm-hmm.
And there's this awareness that we came to, which is, if we're resistant to doing something, it's probably because we feel like it's too big of a task.
Mhm.
And so just our natural innate avoidance
Yeah.
kicks in,
Yeah.
right? And so we find other things that we can do that are easier and have we perceive them as having higher value, right?
Mhm.
So we do the other things. And what we came to is this understanding, okay, if we have that oppositional, that avoidance arise or trigger, that should trigger the thought, oh, we need to break this task down into even smaller steps,
Totally.
get it done.
Yeah. Really well said, James Buchanan. I like how you put that. It's like we're not breaking everything down into tiny little steps because that's kind of a waste of energy. We're using our own knowledge when we're avoidant or, oppositionally defiant into as a recognition that that's a trigger. That's actually, a signal to just think about, okay, what's the smallest first step that you can take on that particular aspect of the project? And, here's an example. Apple. Oh my God, they don't make it easy to figure out their shit, the iTunes, the podcasts,
Yeah.
all that stuff. I mean, it seems like it's easy, but I get the as I delved into this the other day. So what happened with me was I was like, Apple, I got to figure Apple out because it's under my name. And then I would read a page of the website and go, I got to sign up for this. I got to sign up for that. I got to figure out this, and just go, okay, well, I didn't set aside 9 hours to figure Apple out. I'm just going to table that for another day. And then yesterday or whenever I started actually trying to figure it out, I was like, well, just find out what your metrics are on Apple so far. That was a very simple task. They don't show downloads, but they do show subscribers and listeners, how many
Mhm.
times each segment has been listened to. And we weren't on Apple until we did our hard launch on Halloween, but so we only have metrics for November and December basically, but they're shit,
Mhm.
in my opinion. And so now I'm like, well, okay, that's an identifiable problem that I can actually work my way step by step through, figuring out what are the obstacles to being discoverable on this one platform. And then all of that, I think what it does when you take a little tiny step like that, you just pick one aspect that you're interested in. Like for me, it was what are the metrics? I just happened to be curious about that.
Mhm.
I was hoping to see 1 million downloads. Didn't happen. But what,
Yeah.
because they don't show downloads, but also it would never be 1 million. But with our other metrics that they do show.
Yeah, but that speaks to the gifted underachiever delusional,
Right?
that go in there thinking this should be 1 million.
Well, I was hoping.
High standard,
Eh?
high standards. We
I
hold
think
ourselves to a very high standard.
so it was more hope than expectation for sure. But I think the thing that I came away with yesterday was much more motivation to
Mhm.
give it a 3-month window and just break it down. Okay, leave myself breadcrumbs, just work my way through it. Everything becomes less mystifying when you start, and you just start with the part where you're curious about, and then just leave yourself breadcrumbs for the next time you have 20 minutes to go figure out Apple. And I was quite heartened by some of the stuff I found. Like they do have stuff on their things you can download.
It's all this stuff where there's so much,
Yeah.
that it's like Spotify or Apple or whoever wants to give you the resources and tools to succeed on their platform. So you use their platform, you talk about their platform, you get it out there. But there's people like you and I who, when we look at like, here's all the resources and you should look at this because this is going to help you market. This is going to help you do this. And here's all the technical stuff you have to understand. And here's our fact for this, our fact for that. And I'm like, I don't have time.
Mm,
Right.
yeah.
And so should I expect that I can find something that really quickly explains what I want, or do I have to readjust, um, my expectations and my task list
Yeah.
to say, oh, I ran into this brick wall of a huge set of block of text and links.
Yeah.
And so now I need to break this down into smaller tasks. And so the first one is I need to go and find the metrics. And then the next one is I need to go and read this fact, or I need to read this thing.
Yeah.
And just be okay with the fact that you want to get things done quickly, because if you're really goal oriented and you're really excited to achieve that goal, you want to get there quickly, but then you run into this brick wall and you've just got to be able, okay, no, I'm going to have to set the ultimate goal back a little bit, because I'm going to have to put in some smaller tasks here so I can get through this and do it right.
Yeah.
Because we all know what rushed and not asking directions looks like in the end.
It looks like a big fat no from the universe.
Yeah.
Okay, so I have two thoughts on that. One is the very thing you say. So just a confirmation from my experience yesterday was that in order to get the information I needed, I had to pay a really nominal sum to Apple. And then I had obviously a contract with a large organization because I had paid them a fee. So I had to read the terms and conditions. And the terms and conditions is 14 single-spaced pages.
Wow, you did that.
I read it because I'm a fast reader, and also I worked a lot with contracts when I was in the conference industry. So I'm just really looking for intellectual property rights stuff. Like, what do they say they can take, and what do they say is none of their business? And also my responsibilities to them,
Wow.
So that's basically what I was trying to pick out of all that shit. But I mean, I was also reading the whole thing in order to pick it.
I want to just, because I think this is really amazing. So I want to call this out for just a half a sec. Is that I don't read those things. I just click them. I'm a rusher. I want to get where I want to get.
I have to say, I think about it when I'm putting a creative thing out on somebody else's stuff. So if I'm just buying Spotify, I don't read their terms because I'm the user. I'm the end user. They're never going to come after me for listening to the wrong kind of music. But if I'm putting if I was the musician putting shit out on Spotify, or in our case, the podcaster, I'm definitely going to read all the terms and conditions because I want to know what I'm committing to and where my intellectual property rights stand in their world. So,
that makes that's really cool. And, I'm thinking too of, there's so many filmmakers now that are putting out short little things on YouTube.
Yeah.
And, what are the implications of that versus some other platform?
Yeah.
Versus also putting them on your own website or something like that. So,
yeah,
I think that's really cool. So,
thank you so much. The other thing I was thinking was that I do have a tendency this way myself. Are we doing it the hard way by figuring out with each platform? Should we have just gone with Podbean for $9 a month or something, and then it's one interface, we figure it out all this? I don't know if that's what Podbean does, but I feel like possibly it would be a little more streamlined. But on the other hand, then we got to figure out Podbean. So we might as well just figure out the ones we're already using. It'll probably take around the same length of time. It's always going to be, you got to reach stuff. You've got to be able to navigate, whatever they're offering and use it. And then down the road, like maybe in 6 months, we'll go, okay, now we understand Apple, we understand Spotify, we understand Substack, we understand this. Like, we have quite a learning curve and have navigated a learning curve just in terms of Substack. How do you optimize your website on Substack? So it is breaking it down. And I think part of the, for me, the juice that I need in order to break down a really monolithic task and just start somewhere is just follow my interest. What's the one I'm the most curious about, or what seems to have the most benefit? And I thought that, okay, once I saw the metrics, I was like, figuring out Apple is going to have some benefit. It can't go downhill.
Make it any worse, right?
and probably the same with Spotify. And then after that, I've also so there are these monolithic goals. I think they're not even really goals in and of themselves. It's like, we want to have a lot, we want to have a robust community of listeners. We've already got way more listeners than we expected in all these countries, like 25 countries now.
Yeah.
So we just want to keep on keep on a roll. We don't want to stagnate. And that requires us actually learning and discovering, what works and what doesn't work. And in order to do that, we need to know where we already are. So
Right.
anyway, I didn't mean to hijack that whole.
No, I think that was all really, really good. And the thing, one of the things that I picked up is when you realize that something that feels like it should be a small task, like going to Apple and just trying to figure out our metrics, right?
Yeah.
That turns into a much bigger task because there's more involved than you anticipated. And there's a certain frustration. And then for me, an instinct to either shut it down or rush through it and miss probably important things and
Right.
not learn important skills. And so that got me to thinking, when you do this, like when you recognize, okay, I'm having a little bit of oppositional or avoidance or whatever around this, I need to break it down into smaller tasks. I think what's also happening is you're learning a lot more new things.
True.
Right?
Yeah.
And so you're gaining new skills, new capabilities, new tools. And that makes you a much more valuable creative and generally more valuable person because, there are people out there you can pay a ton of money to set up your podcast for you. It's up to you whether you succeed, but they'll do all the, we'll link you to this, we'll link you to that. We'll, handle all the nitty gritty stuff for you so that you don't have to, right? Which sounds really, really nice and probably is in some circumstances, but we're mid-level, trying to punch up as opposed to punch down. And so gathering those skills mean that, maybe we could turn around at some point. And if one of our goals is to monetize the Gifted Underachievers podcast, maybe it's not the podcast that we monetize, but it's our skills that we've developed.
Yeah, we got to fund that trip to the podcast convention in London. So
the Academy Awards.
The Academy Awards.
Yes. That's now on the list.
Yes.
Gifted that'll be probably an upcoming discussion.
I think so. Yeah. So what we have here that we're talking about right now is Gifted Underachievers. When you're setting goals for 2025, it's easy to think about in terms of personal goals. Oh, I'm going to get fit, or I'm going to get fitter, or I'm going to do a bunch of winter hiking, whatever it is, and separate that from professional goals or work goals. Oh, I'm going to finish my novel. I'm going to put out another nonfiction book. Like, these are mine. I'm going to fix my fucking funnel, stuff like that. Right. So those are goals of various sizes, but they all involve work. And then your personal goals, various sizes, also involve work and in some ways mindset and habit change, but same with the professional ones. And with Gifted Underachievers, we're in the lucky position of it being personal as well as professional because we aren't making money off it. It's something we're doing because it's fun and we enjoy it. And also because it's answering questions for us that we couldn't find answered anywhere else on the podcast landscape. So, well, one thing it's not a business. It's got all these different aspects to it. And in that way, it kind of mirrors life. It's a little bit messy. Like, my goal to write a novel or to write the experimental draft of my novel means that I have to, it's like putting a stone, in the water and there's the ripple. It means there's things I won't have time to do that I normally do when I'm not writing a novel. Yeah. So it's a creative goal. It's personal. It's also professional in that I have more credibility the more books I have published, basically, because I help people, write their books. And so in order to set a creative goal, in my experience, there is nothing super creative that's really fast except a 3-day novel. You have to decide what you're going to say no to. And even in that microcosmic world of the 3-day novel, I have to say no to everything that weekend except writing a novel, basically a novella. But so what do you think? What do you think about that? What are your thoughts?
It's all true, right? If you're going to do one thing, then it may mean that you're not going to do another, right? So when you're talking about that, I sat down and thought about this book Trundle that I'm writing.
Yeah.
It's, a series of interconnected short stories that lead to the final story and, a big blow up kind of thing. And I'm writing that, and I'm writing it that way because I can take these individual stories the second they're done and start sending them out, right?
Yeah.
And one of them almost got published by the New Yorker, which I was like, holy shit, right?
Yeah.
So I'm doing that, and then they're going to add up to be a novel.
Yeah.
So I'm going to have a bigger thing, when they're done. So, I'm trying to kind of get as much juice out of one thing as I possibly can. But when I'm thinking about, okay, in 2025, I want to have it done. When can I get it? Do I think I can get it done by? What is that going to require?
Yeah.
And what you were just saying then got me to think I haven't thought about those trade-offs.
Yeah.
So what is it going to displace?
Yeah.
And where is the room in the schedule that can be displaced, right?
Yeah.
So will it become, time that I spend relaxing in the evening? I cut that down by like an hour, or is it going to be, something else? And those are choices that you got to make, So I like to do, a lot of trail running and hiking and all that kind of stuff. Am I going to have to cut into that? I don't want to, but
No. And
and then daytime work, the
Yeah.
regular work. Yeah. So
Yeah.
you got to figure all that shit out.
And it might not even be as simple as where's my schedule at, because I think it's also got to do with how creative can you be in using other stuff you're working on and your schedule and your other goals. Like, for example, the grant experiment, part of what we're doing is, well, part of what you're doing is applying to residencies. And so how great would it be to be at Yaddo to work on the Trundle shit? You'd get it done in a heartbeat.
Yeah.
But what that means is, now correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think you're writing your grant applications when you would be writing Trundle. So it's not really a trade-off there. It's like you have a fresh fire under your motivation for getting a residency, and maybe your criteria are lower. You don't need to be at Yaddo. Maybe you need to be down the street, at the closest one that you can do 2 weeks in like late spring. And sort of bend your grant application stuff around that opportunity so that it kind of works with your need to get the Trundle draft done. And the great thing about the way you're doing Trundle is that your shit's polished. Because you're sending it out individually as stories first. So in order to do that, you're not sending out an exploratory draft. You're sending out what you're probably going to mostly end up with. So there's that. It might be a little more integrative than just saying, I don't want to give my writing time. Is there a way, or my running time? What if you could have like a voice memo recorder while you're running, and like anytime, instead of fantasizing about the movie set, write a little bit. I don't know. Like, it's one of those things where the more creative you can be about who you are this year, who do you have to be the person who writes Trundle this year?
Yeah.
That might be something. And then there's other.
That's a great question. Who do I have to be to write Trundle this year?
Yeah. You have to be not the you from last year that did make progress on Trundle, but you want to finish it this year. So who do you have to be to finish it this year, or to really get it done, to write Trundle this year? I'm just writing that down because that's going to help me too. I'm just thinking, who do I have to be to write my Frankenstein novel this year? I have to be different than I was last year, because last year, I have to say, I was so preoccupied with mom stuff and selling her condo and moving her. And like, there was stuff. I'm going to do a retrospective of last year because I felt like I got sweet fuck all done, but I actually feel like if I really looked at it, I got a shitload done. So
I think, if you really look at it and don't place a value on any one thing, they all had to get done.
Yeah.
You're going to see that you did a lot. And, I would feel the same way. There are different life things that came up and got in the way. And one thing at a time. But, on balance, there's a lot that got done. And I would say, too, just to revisit the Yaddo thing just a little bit.
Yeah.
Is yes, it does add, I have a project to pitch for it. I have a reason to be there.
Yeah.
So it's helped with that. But I have to be careful, too, that I don't set up this, well, I'm going to do the writing when I get a residency somewhere.
No, true. exactly.
So there's that piece of who do I have to be?
Yeah, you have to be
Possibly,
both.
yeah, and how cutthroat do you have to be?
Well, you
Right.
have to be pretty hardcore. I think one thing that would help me and has in the past is that maybe the things you say no to, maybe it's really a not now.
Yeah. Well, and in your situation, I would say how cutthroat do you have to be because you still have responsibilities for your mom, you
Mhm.
still have responsibilities for your work, you still have responsibilities to your kids, though,
Yeah.
they're a little bit older, so it's not quite the same. And you still have responsibilities to your sister, and then there's just stuff you want to do, like
Yeah.
go out and have a life, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I think how cutthroat do I have to be? I have to remember that writing time can look pretty lazy sometimes because you're thinking or you're reading and stuff like that. But I also think cutthroat as in I can't be self-indulgent about how I spend my time.
Hmm.
I can't be self-indulgent about that. So, yes, if I've had a shit week and I wanna watch fucking Midwest Magic Cleaning on YouTube's oh my god, that guy makes me laugh. Then I can do that, but I can do it for half an hour. Like, there's a point at which relaxing just turns kinda toxic anyways. So, like, for example, last night, okay, I have another project which is personal and also sort of feels obligatory, which is, only because of me, is to get all the family photo albums digitized.
Ah,
And so I'm going to say probably 20 photo albums. And I spent about an hour on one of them last night and I got about a third of the way through. So this is a major time suck. I realized that it's a similar thing with some of the gifted underachievers initiatives like the merch.
mhm.
I realized that it is more complicated than I thought it was. The stuff I am good at, like creating the images for the merch, or in this case, creating a system for digitizing the photo albums is also stuff that takes a long time. But I did it in little bits and pieces. It's not the end of the world. I know more than I did 2 months ago on the merch front. And so it's like whatever, water under the bridge.
Yeah.
And so I think that I'm gonna to go back to how hardcore do you have to be? I think for me, I have to understand sometimes that my urge to get things done in an expeditious manner is not always going to be gratified. I have to be willing to take my time
Mhm.
because it's better to take your time and do it right than it is to rush through it and have to redo it. And so,
Yeah. Yeah. And the the other thing is you're not a prima donna, right?
thank you.
So you're not going to go marching around the house to your daughters. I need silence. I'm an author trying to write. Yeah. Kind of
I can't imagine that.
like a friend is like, Pat, I really need to talk. And oh my God, will people not leave me alone?
That might be my internal, that second one, I must say. Like, okay, so what do you think? What do you think about goal setting for 2025? Do we want to do some real time goal setting for GU right now?
Right now, live and yeah. Yeah. Well, so we've talked about one, we want to grow the listeners, right? We want to have more people and not in a cheesy, we need to be heard by more people, but there's an audience out there we believe for this. And so we want to figure out how to reach them and they can decide whether they want it or not.
Yeah.
Um,
I think
and then,
let's reach more listeners. I think
yeah,
wording is important. Reach more listeners.
okay. And then, monetize, right? And it sounds like a pretty crappy kind of word, but yeah, it'd be nice to serve our listeners, authentically without charging them and be free, but also, make a couple of bucks so we can do more with this.
Mm-hmm.
I think we've talked about that, and part of that is that merch that you were talking about. And then what was another one? I think we had like three, maybe four
Goals
categories that we had talked about before
for monetization or for goals?
for goals.
Um, let's see. Reach more listeners, monetize without being leeches, and well, I think just getting our systems in place, like really optimizing all of our systems
Hmm.
and learning when our systems suck and changing them to better systems. So I'm going to say optimizing systems, and that includes things like the platform, the website at Substack and all that stuff. Like just making sure that all the low-hanging fruit has been picked
Right.
in terms of making it operational, basically at the very most basic level.
And digestible, right?
Yeah.
So, it always comes down to like serving the listener. And so how can we do that better?
Well,
Yeah.
I think that's two different things. So one of them is optimizing for our use, optimizing how we understand things work, making it easy, making it fast. And I think maybe we have a fourth one, which is not just reaching more listeners. That was our first one, but really honing what we're serving up.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think there maybe is a fourth, but that just thematic through line is we're everything we want to do is in service to the people who are taking their time to listen.
Yeah.
And so it guides, and I'm, this, I'm just stating it out loud. So
Yeah.
it's out there, but it's just having that be the guide.
Okay, serving listeners, I think you're right. And that also applies to our guests, because there's a shitload of wisdom out there for mid-level creatives, like so much. And some of it is from people who are doing it, like our current guests, our recent guests, Kath and Doug and Kristen. And some of it is from available, like people with deep knowledge of individual industries and how to sort of, if there are gatekeepers, how to either appeal to them, bypass them, short circuit that whole thing. Like, so we've got, we really feel like part of the point in programming interviews is to interview people who can serve the listeners the best. And obviously people, that are willing to be gifted achievers. Anybody's interested, give us a call. Send
If
us a
you're
note.
out there.
Yeah. And then the other part is, and this is probably quite frivolous, and I imagine it's related to monetization. So this is, I would say maybe this is not a goal. What is this? A symptom. I want to go to London. I want to go to that London thing.
Yeah.
The podcast thing. I think it'll be fun. And there might be other stuff ancillary to that I think is good. But that's it.
Yeah, that would be the, have fun stuff.
Yeah.
So we have a lot of fun doing this. And there's probably even more fun that like doesn't get captured in the segments. Just goofing around trying to figure shit out. But but fun in terms of going to London Podcast Fest would be awesome. And so that's another thing, right, where there has to be a system and a process. Because how does somebody do that? Well, we have to find out what that looks like. But
yes,
you're
exactly.
Run into that wall of text again.
I don't think we will. I mean, but you're right, because
at some point
there's many aspects. Yeah, you're right. You're right. And so that's one of those things you have to get context. You got to let it unfold. You got to actually start somewhere. Those types of goals, to keep it fun, I think it's really, I just started working with a writer who's sort of using a conference as one of her milestones for her project. And so I wrote a project guide and, built the conference dates into, and, so there's a bunch of stuff she can do before then, figure out who she wants to meet with at the conference, what she needs to have for them, book proposal, one sheet, stuff like that, stuff that will move her project along, but it's built around an external goal. I think sometimes if you set something like that in place, like for us, maybe it's using the London thing, and it could be London 2026. Like, I'm not saying it's going to work in 2025, but using something like that as a way to sort of motivate you to do the things that are not fun or sexy. They're just like, I gotta do this. That's a really good way to get yourself through goal setting for a year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, and to people who are listening, it probably feels like we've overfilled our plate. Right?
Does it? What do you mean?
I can see, and probably, when we listen back through on the edit, we might feel like, wow, that feels like we've really, put a lot on the plate. And And yeah, I think so. But, again, to get back to what we were talking to at the beginning is when we run into that avoidant oppositional piece, then we have a strategy.
Mhm.
Say, let's break this down into smaller steps so that this thing gets done. And what's going to motivate us and pull us through those smaller steps and not give up or walk away
Yeah.
is we really want to achieve that goal of going to London podcast, finishing the novel,
Yeah.
whatever it is.
I see what you're saying. Yeah. Yeah, when you look at the whole big picture, it does feel like there's a lot going on. It's always felt like that for me because I've been running my own business for a long time, and I've been creating shit for a long time, and I just feel like there's lots of tools that can help you. For me, time blocking, being clear, having smaller milestones within a bigger goal, but the main thing is believing you can do it. Like, and if you need to say not now to something, then being okay with saying not now, taking it off completely, not trying to do it around the edges, not trying to still fit it in, but actually just being, no, if I'm going to pick one thing in this domain that I'm going to work on. So let's say we've got 4 goals, reach more listeners. That means a lot of stuff like optimizing the platforms. It means maybe creating a funnel so that we have stuff that brings listeners in, but monetize without charging listeners. Those are all big picture things, but they also work together. And so we, and a year is 12 months and we're at the beginning of the first month. So
Yeah.
I want to say I like to work in quarters because I know I can get the merch up in 3 months. It'll be up by my birthday, which is coincidentally very close to the birthday of Amy Sedaris. She's March 29th. I'm March 31st.
Well, you're almost birthday buddies.
Almost birthday twins.
Wow. Very cool.
You know who else's birthday was March 31st? Adolf Hitler.
Well,
I better check that. I don't know if it's true. Well, so what do you think?
Yeah, are you just randomly making up birthday buddies?
Oh shit! Yeah, it's completely wrong. His birthday is April 20th. Why did I? All the people to think I was a birthday buddy. I mean, okay.
Yeah, your grandiosity is really, it's endless. All right, well, I think we've done it. So, we're going to hit this probably again. And, as we were talking, I remembered there's somebody I want to bring in for an interview who's like an expert on this kind of stuff. Here we go. 2025. Bring it on.
Here we go. Yeah. Hit the ground running.
Yep. Coming in hot. Share
your art. Create more stuff. Let it ride. Ride it hard.
All right. A little bit.
Thanks for listening to Gifted Underachievers, the podcast for mid-level creatives with delusional ambitions. Do you have goals for 2025? If yes, consider dropping by our Substack site at giftedunderachievers.substack.com and putting a note in the comments to let us know what they are. Until next time.